My name is Melissa Jeter, Librarian Specialist for the Art Tatum African American Resource Center, located in the Kent branch of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. Welcome to the Art Tatum African American Resource Center's Oral History Project, the Edrene Cole Collection. Dr. Edrene Cole was a local African American historian and educator who began collecting the stories of noteworthy Toledoans in the African American community. With this oral history project, the Art Tatum African American Resource Center honors her memory and her work. Join me and University of Toledo Professor of Anthropology, Dr. William Macarthur, as Toledo's very own African Americans share the stories of their lives.
Hi, I'm Dr. William Macarthur. In this segment, we're at the home of world-renowned sculptor, teacher, father, and husband, Mr. Lemaxie Glover, who passed away in 1984 at the age of 67. Karen, thank you for inviting us into your home to talk about your father and his work.
Quite welcome.
Karen, before we talk about your father's career as a sculptor and teacher, I'd like to learn a little bit more about his early life before he became the famed sculptor. When and where was your father born?
He was born in Kelly's, Georgia.
Okay.
And he came to Toledo when he was about 6 years old.
About 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea of why he and his parents came to Toledo?
My grandmother said that she did not want him to be raised in the South with discrimination and so forth, and the hateful ways of things that were happening, there.
Okay, so they came here to escape
The racism.
of the South.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what year they came here?
If he was about 6 years old, or maybe 4, he was born in 1916, so about 1920.
1920 they came here. Okay, good. Tell me his mother and father's name.
Elmira and Troy Glover.
Okay. Do you have an idea of where they lived in Toledo when they first arrived here?
On 512 Vance Street.
512 Vance Street, okay. I know that your mother, Mary, and your father were married in like about 1941. Where was your mother born and raised?
She was born in Dyersburg, Tennessee.
Dyersburg, Tennessee. Okay. Do you have any a sense of how the two of them met?
Oh, yes, at St. Paul Baptist Church.
Okay.
The church, they met there. My father's family was very active there. My mother was very active there, from children.
Okay. So then your mom at some point migrated herself to Toledo then?
Yes, she came to Toledo to be with her older sister, Lizzie V. Wyatt. And because when her sister left to get married, my mother's mother felt she would be alone up here, so she sent the little sister to come up here to be with her.
Okay. So your mom and dad then met at church then. Wonderful. Okay. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have 2 brothers, Donald and Michael.
Okay, and where do you fall in that?
I am the oldest, firstborn.
You're the firstborn?
Yes.
Okay, Karen, I'd like to now then shift gears and talk specifically about your father.
Okay.
I guess he might be considered a late bloomer in that he didn't begin his sculpting career until his late 30s. But can you walk me through his work career here in Toledo?
Okay, at 34, he saw the first steam engine coming through. And he told my mom, I'm going back to school, because when he was in the Navy during World War II, he got access to the GI Bill.
Okay.
And so he went back and got his bachelor's of education at TU, Toledo University.
Okay, but during the time in which he made this decision, he was working where in Toledo?
New York Central Railroad.
Okay, what kind of work was he doing?
He was a fireman, and that's interesting because I have no concept of what he was doing. But I guess you throw the fire in the, the coals in the engine so it could roll.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
And so it's during the time which he's working then in this capacity that he makes the decision to return to school.
At 34.
At 34. But during this time, he had a family.
3 of us.
He had
3 little children.
3 children at that time, and he still made the courageous decision to return to school.
That's right.
Okay. What did he study at the University of Toledo?
Education. He went into education.
Okay.
And so he got a Bachelor of Education degree.
Okay. Now, was it because it was his intent to teach? Is that what he wanted to do?
Oh, yes. Yes, he wanted to teach.
Okay, Karen, I know that your father started Cranbrook in about 1954. Can you talk a little bit about how he wound up at Cranbrook?
Okay, he had graduated from the University of Toledo, and Mrs. M.C. Lockhart McKelvey liked his work because he had always shown in Karen's Polo and Hunt Club and around the Toledo area Artists Club and the exhibitions there. And she called him up one day. I remember the call. I was a little girl.
Okay.
The call came through, and she said to him, "Would you like to go to Cranbrook?" And his face lit up, and he was so excited. He said yes. He said, "But how am I going to take care of my family?" And he said, "I don't have, I have to work to provide for my family."
Sure.
And she said, "You tell your wife to gather up all her expenses, and she will get a check every month to cover her expenses." Now, my mother never worked until I was a senior in high school, and that's how he went to Cranbrook. She sponsored him, and they paid the rent, for the house that she had given him, and they paid that back. But they said, "We will pay that back to you," and they kept, the scholarship.
Really? But someone thought that he had such potential.
That's right.
That they were willing to sponsor him to attend Cranbrook. Okay. Just so that it's clear, what's so special about Cranbrook?
Cranbrook is one of the finest art schools in the country. It often, if you will look at U.S. News and Reports, it alternates 1 and 2 in many areas with New England School of Design, Pratt Institute,
Okay.
in the various disciplines. And it's in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, which is a very ritzy area in Michigan. In fact, George Romney came from that area.
Sure.
And it is a fabulous place.
Now, did your dad ever talk about how he was received and treated at Cranbrook?
Oh, yes, he loved it there. He was the second black person to attend there. And he loved the international flavor of Cranbrook because it was very small, only about 100, 150 people, I think, were there.
Okay.
And they were from all over the world.
Okay.
Yeah, all over the world. We had, I was just talking to my cousin earlier, and I was telling her that Jan and Phil, some friends of ours, were coming in, and she said, "Oh, are they the Filipino people? We haven't realized we're little." I said, no, that was Jesse. But she had, she would see some of the friends that my father had that he brought home.
Really? Okay.
Because if you were, Jesse was a great friend of his, and Jesse Galvanti, and he brought him home from the Philippines. Who brought him home from Cranbrook because he had nowhere to go at Christmas time. Things like that. And Jan and Phil often visited us during the holidays. Whenever they felt like it was like a second home. They just come in any time of the night, and we just let them in.
Like family.
Yeah, family. Yeah.
Okay, so Karen, your father then lived at Cranbrook while he was attending there.
That's right.
How did that work out with the family?
He came home on weekends. He came home on Friday night. My mother would drive there and pick him up, and then he would take the train back. And the interesting story about that, the train people, the conductor knew to wait for him because he was always late. So he was always running to make the train. But my mother would drive up there and take us sometimes, or take my little brother, and go get him. And then they would come back, and he'd spend the weekends at home.
So he did that for about how many years?
He did that about 2 years. He spent a year and got his master's, and then he went back to Cranbrook to teach.
Okay, so once he finished the program, he was invited to come back and teach.
Well, yes, and also, and this is a very interesting story here, he applied to the Toledo public school system, and he did not get a job. E.O. Boucher at that time said he wasn't hiring art teachers.
Okay.
And you have to understand, at the time, there were only so many African Americans teaching in high school. And a lot of them, there was only one man, Jimmy Hill, and he was fair-skinned.
Okay.
And so then the next year, they let him teach in high school, and he went to Woodward High School.
Woodward High School. And how long did he teach at Woodward?
Oh, he taught at Woodward about 20, 25 years. Because he left it about in 74, 73.
Okay.
And went to Scott High School.
Scott High School. So did he, what was his, I mean, he had a dual passion for both teaching and being a sculptor. Did you like them both equally well?
Oh, yes, he loved being a teacher because he liked impacting, people and children, or students, because they were high school students.
Okay.
And every day he always told us stories about his students at school. And he would have us laughing and talking. And in fact, I think I developed my interest for learning and teaching learning from him.
Let's ask you, because you yourself are you a retired school teacher?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you were inspired by your father.
Of course. But they taught us very early to have a passion for learning. And I think one of the reasons I went into teaching is because I wanted to inspire others to learn. I love learning, and I wanted to teach them how to learn. See, one of the things I'll never forget my father doing for us, he did many, many things in teaching lessons for my brothers and myself. He let a mosquito bite him so that we could see how the blood went into the mosquito sac or whatever, and then, how they fed and things like that. And I can remember being in that backyard. He said, now watch this. And, we saw how the mosquito operated.
Really? So let's sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about the kind of father that he was.
Absolutely the best father anyone could ever have.
Really?
He was kind of a jokester, and he loved his family. Yeah, when my mother and my father, everything was done with us in mind. And he just loved being a family man, and, just involved with us in every way.
Okay. But I have to ask you, because you're a self-proclaimed daddy's girl.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I am.
Okay, we're good. Because the reason I asked the question, because so often, or at least sometimes, rather, should I say, when a person's career takes off, they sort of lose track of their family. But it sounds as if your dad kept track of his family and continued to be a good father and husband.
Oh, that's right. Well, his first role, of course, is to be a good husband to my mother. And then the children, we are the second role.
Sure.
And he took that very, very seriously. And they both didn't make decisions without the other and with the family in mind. He had an opportunity to possibly go to Lehigh University, and a guy was wooing him to go there and work in art. And my mother did not want to leave Toledo, and so he chose to stay here and make a name for himself.
Okay. He became, this sort of, because he was such a good sculptor, became really, really famous and was known for his good work. How did he accept all the success?
I think that he always was amazed at how he was blessed with the opportunity to impact people, to have this gift, to see people react to it. He was just wonderful. Some of his pieces were very, very emotional. He did a piece called Othello II. I named it Othello II.
Okay.
What it was is this man crying. And one lady was interested in buying him. And, my dad would let you keep a piece in his house for a while. Well, in this case, she had to give it back because, see, everybody in the house started crying. That's how emotional this piece was. Really? And it used to sit in the sun parlor. And my grandmother would turn it around so she didn't see his face. So eventually he did sell it. But if you looked at him in a long time, you would start crying too.
Really? So you think that he was able to express himself through his craft?
Oh, yes. That's one of the ways he was able to express himself. He had so many ways. He just liked living. He liked art, all kinds of art. And he just liked being in this world. He enjoyed it.
Did he ever share with you or talk about any, because this was during a time when race relations weren't the best, did he ever share with you any situations in which he felt as though he'd been discriminated against?
Well, there, of course, being of African American descent, that was constant all the time back pre-Obama.
Right.
And so, sure, he often talked about in a situation with the Toledo Public Schools, it was a question, there was an opening, and yeah, as I said, the superintendent wasn't comfortable with hiring him at that time. And then the next year it opened up.
Well, but when he was rejected initially, how did that make him feel?
Well, he just said, I'll just go back to Cranbrook and teach. And here he's teaching in one of the best schools in the country.
Yeah.
So he went back for another year and taught there.
Okay, so it was their 1 year's lost then. You said that earlier that his grandmother got him out of the South to...
His mother.
His mother, excuse me. His mother got him out of the South to escape some of the hardships of the South. Did she ever get a chance to see his success?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. She saw it. She was very proud of him. And the very interesting story about my grandfather was that when he was a little boy, he said my dad was always my dad said he was always drawing. You know, that came easy to him. So my grandfather said, why are you drawing like that? You're not going to do anything with it. And then when he became well known, that's my boy. That's my boy. So
the proud father.
The proud father, yes.
Absolutely. Well, I know that your father did sculptures of a lot of people and animals, other things. Did he ever do a sculpture of family members?
Yes, we all have our heads, our busts.
Okay.
All three of us, the children. My mother has a bust of her.
Okay.
My mother's father has a bust.
Okay.
Yes, and I was fortunate enough to get, at 21, I requested that he make me a piece of sculpture. Okay. And he did, Laughing Girl, and she's been on the cover of WGTE program book.
Really? Okay.
And yes.
Did he do one of your brothers also?
Oh, yes, all of us.
Okay.
All the children have, busts. And it was interesting because my mother always wanted us done. So whenever he had a show, he would snatch one of us, and we would be the model. And that's how we were done. He did me in one day.
Did he really?
He said I was easy to do. He knew me very well, and I had, features that were easy to do.
How long would it take him to do a piece?
Well, a piece of sculpture or a bust?
A bust. Yeah.
Well, as I say, to me, he did me in a day, about in one sitting.
Okay.
But it was a long sitting now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of clay did he use?
California red clay.
Okay.
And he liked that clay a lot.
Like that a lot.
He was sitting for California, get California red clay.
Wow. Okay. Okay, good. What else should we know about your father something that's not commonly known to most people?
Oh, well, he loved to travel, loved to do that. He just, I don't know if it's commonly known, he just loved being. He loved being a part of this world. He just loved talking to people. He loved sharing with people. He loved solving problems with people. A lot of times he was like a counselor in school. I remember one story about two families who were feuding, and he brought two of the children together, and they were able to become friends. They were cousins.
Really?
He loved just being a part of this world and giving the best and making you bring out your best and, become a really good problem solver.
Wow. What do you miss most about your father?
Everything. I miss his smile. I miss talking to him. We talked about a lot of intellectual things. We talked about newsworthy things. We talked about just life in general. The way he comforted you.
Okay. Okay. Well, obviously, I think you told me earlier that when you were an infant that that he was able to comfort you in a different way. So tell me that again.
Well, I was one of those little colicky crying babies. I didn't like to sleep at night, and I still don't. But when he was studying, as long as I saw him, I wouldn't cry. So when he studied at night, he would take me and prop me up in the chair, and I was a little baby, 6, 7 months, and then I'd watch him study. And I wouldn't cry.
You wouldn't cry. So you were a baby girl from daddy's girl from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, he was one of the. He was a gem. He was my favorite.
Wow, well, good. Okay, and I think your father gave much to the city. He gave much to the state, much to the world because of his work.
That's right.
Where is his work still on display?
Okay, in Toledo, he did a giant crucifix that is in St. Richard's Church, and I think that's in Swanton, I want to say. It's very, very big. Redeemer Lutheran Church has a shepherd, and that's quite as tall as I am. The crucifix is very big, and he used our neighbor's hands as the model.
Did he really?
And he studied that. I remember him looking at this book called The Shroud of Turin, and the nails on my dad's crucifix are in between here, not in the hands, because if you put them in the hands, they would have, pulled the person down. So the nails are in between two bones.
Okay.
And that holds you up. And so his crucifix is like that.
Is it really?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And the tree that he used was donated from the city of Toledo.
Really? Okay, good.
He has a lot of pieces, a couple pieces in the University of Toledo, in the alumni office. He, Despair is in there. He did a bust of Dr. Helen Holt, and I think that's in the education building. And there may be one or two other pieces, around. But around Toledo, they're mostly in private collections, and no one is selling.
Now, when you see work, can you identify his work?
Yes. Oh, yes. In fact, we were at a doctor's office. My mother was, and she looked at this. Well, it was a rather big lead relief. And she told the person, she said, I think that's my husband's work. And so I went back to the doctor's office and I said, I believe that's my father's work. And sure enough, it was.
Was it really?
And he was shocked. He said, he didn't know it was a Lemaxie Glover because he brought it from another doctor. And next time I went in, it wasn't there. He took it home.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. He told me I could come and see it anytime I wanted to.
But at home.
But at home. And Key Bank Trust Corp did a show on my father many years ago. And, Peggy Grant was coordinating it along with Joyce Jones. And when people found out they were doing a show, they kept bringing all their work in because they wanted to be in this show. And they were getting so much work. And it was really overwhelming. Trust Corp was just shocked.
Really?
And they really did put on a nice show for him.
Does he have pieces also at the Kent Branch Library?
Oh, yes, Golden Boy. I have to tell you the story about Golden Boy. Golden Boy is done in a gold patina. And a patina is like a paint for sculpture. And I remember I went to the show and Golden Boy was in the show. And I told somebody, I said, I don't think that's my dad's work. I said, because I hadn't seen Golden Boy. I was away at college, too, and he might have done Golden Boy when I wasn't there. Sure. We always saw Daddy's work. I said, I think they put, a piece of sculpture in that wasn't my dad. So I walked over and picked Golden Boy up and looked inside his head. And sure enough, it was Daddy's initials, because he had LMG and the date.
Okay.
And I said, oh, yeah. And this guard walked up to me and said, ma'am, what are you doing? I said, I'm the daughter. And I put it back down because they didn't want everybody picking it up.
This is my daddy's work.
Yeah, that's right. Because I'm used to touching the sculptures and picking them up and things like that. But they didn't want anybody else to do that. And, so.
Well, interesting. Interesting. Well, good. Karen, at what point in your life did you realize that your father was famous?
I've always known that he was well known, or people appreciated his work. So when we were little children, my mother explained to us that when people walk up to him, and this happened all over the country, when people walked up to him, we just sort of ease away and let them have him.
Really?
For a time. And I'll always remember the time we went to Disney World. We were with some friends. Our friends were saying, oh, please stay an extra day. We were on Christmas break. Please stay an extra day. And we heard this voice. Then, Mr. Glover, hi, Mr. Glover. and it was Merle Grant, Assistant Superintendent of Toledo Public Schools. And we turned to him and said, now we can't stay an extra day because they know we were down here. So we have to go back to work Monday.
We've been discovered.
Yes. So he was recognized wherever we went. And ever since I was a little girl, when my mother explained to us about how people were interested in his work, when they walked up to him, we just sort of eased away.
But how protective of you all was he in that regard?
In that regard, well, back then you didn't have to be as protective as you were today, in the sense that, you know, he pushed you aside. We just eased away on our own. And then he would, you know, continue to talk. I guess if he looked around, he was by himself. Because, you know, really being little children, your parents always taught you don't walk up to strangers and don't let strangers talk to you. So when they were strangers talking to him, we just sort of eased away because we didn't want to get in trouble talking to somebody we didn't know.
Sure.
And also, they were always friendly and everything, but we just, you know, kind of knew that they were interested in him, and we didn't have to talk.
You gave him his space.
Yes, right.
What inspired your father to become a sculptor?
He was always interested in art and always drawing. And he got, you know, he went to the Toledo Museum of Art for classes. And he, you know, was taking painting classes and drawing classes. Then one day, he touched sculpture. And a guy by the name of Ernie Mall was there. And he touched clay. And he said, this is what I want to do. It's like his hands and the clay became one.
Really?
And he did that
And
the rest of his life. Yeah, the rest is history.
Wow. Okay.
He liked doing that.
Okay. Well, Karen, again, it sounds different. Again, your father just gave him, he gave so much. And it sounds like he was a very humble man.
Oh, very humble, very humble. You know, he was very religious, and he was very accepting of what life had brought him, and very much in awe of the fact that he could accomplish so much in his lifetime. Very pleased with that, and just very humble, and just thought, you know, what a great life I have, you know, that he was able to do some of the things he wanted to do.
How proud is your mother of your father?
Well, you know, she's very proud, but you know, she was with him. They were together. Sure. So his pride, you know, yeah, you know, it was each other. So they really, you know, they were really a team. Okay. You know, really a team.
Okay. Karen, before we go, I want to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about Edrene Cole. Mrs. Cole, of course, was an educator in Toledo and spent most of her life both teaching and documenting Black history of Toledo. What are your memories of Edrene Cole? Edrene
Cole was my third grade teacher, and she was my second Black teacher, African American teacher. What I didn't realize about Edrene Cole when I was in third grade is that she was a very short person. She wore spike heels, and she was very powerful. Okay. And wanted us to do really well. So when I got into my high school years, she came to our church. Our parents belonged to our church. And she came to our church, and I looked down on her. And you know, I'm a little short person too.
You're short.
And so I looked down on her and I said, gee, when I was in third grade, I didn't think she was that short. But the lesson I learned from Edrene Cole was this: no matter how short you are, you walk tall.
That's right.
You walk tall. And she had that confidence. She walked tall, and she didn't let her size stop her. So, and she was an inspiration to us all because she's, you can do it. You can have a better life from yourself. And you can have your goals. And you walk tall. So I learned that from her.
And you do walk tall, Karen, just so you'll know.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You walk tall.
Now, as you became an adult, did you know Edrene as an adult as well?
Oh, yes. Sure. As I say, her parents went to St. Paul Baptist Church. Okay. And I had, we're both AKAs, by the way. And also, I've traveled with her to Europe, so I've known her. And she has a knack of doing things just right.
Well, wonderful.
Yes.
Well, again, what you just said sort of fits everything that I know of Edrene, in terms of her just being a very positive person, just a dynamite person. And again, that's one of the reasons why we are honoring her through this collection.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Very
yes.
deserving. Great. Okay, Karen. Well, then I think as we begin to wind up, anything else we need to know about your father that we now talked about?
Well, I think the gift that he gives to all of the young people and to all of us is that no matter what hardships you have, my dad worked 2 or 3 jobs and went to school to make it better for me and my brothers. And no matter what obstacles you have, if you have it in your heart and the desire is there, you can make a way and you can do it.
Wonderful. Well, then, I'm going to let that then be the last powerful words.
Okay.
Karen, thank you ever so much for allowing us to come to your home.
Okay.
And for you to share your thoughts with us.
It's been a pleasure.
About your
It's
father.
been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jan and Phil, I know that you both attended Cranbrook with Lemaxie, but let's go back a little bit. What is Cranbrook and what's special about it?
Well, you know, nothing really was special about it when I first heard of it. I was going to school in Buffalo, Albright Art School, an undergraduate art school, with a fairly good reputation nationwide. And it was on a bulletin board mentioning this school. And it was a 3-year school. After 3 years in 1952, I was drafted into the Korean War.
Okay.
And when I got out, I went to New York. And I wanted to be a painter, an artist. So I was sort of cut off from my parents, who were Russian Jewish immigrants who came over in 1920 after the pogroms and the revolution in Russia. Okay. They had narrowly escaped. Right. Their town was burned down, and they came to America, and they were delighted. They were in America, America the beautiful, you know. So anyway, my dad wanted me to be a success, wanted me to be somebody. Certainly not a painter, a guy who made pictures.
Right.
So I went. You know, after the service, I knew I was on my own, and I was delighted. I felt great. I was going to New York, and I was going to be a real fine artist. And I got a job at the Astor Hotel, working front service, mostly operating an elevator, and I painted during the days. Okay. And a fellow from Albright, the school I went to before I went into the service, got on the car, on the elevator, Harvey Levitt, and great to see him. And he said he'd been at Cranbrook, a school called Cranbrook. And you remember Cranbrook, don't you? The bulletin board and all that? We was discussing it. Well, I didn't remember it. He said, you might like it. He said, I hated it. Why don't you try for the scholarship? So, you know, school is a school. Some people like it and some people don't.
Right.
He didn't like Cranbrook. Well, you know, I thought it was an opportunity. I filled out the form. I got some Xeroxes of my work, which I thought were sort of, you know, some good, some not so good. Make a long story short, I got the international scholarship in painting. Full tuition for a year, full room and board. That's where we met Max. That's where I met my future wife. It was amazing to go from the elevator at Times Square to this kind of little paradise north of Detroit. Owned by the Booth family, the owners of the Detroit Free Press, who wanted a kind of facsimile English village with the church and the school, various schools and an art school. And I think he even imported 100 Italian gardeners from Italy to live there permanently, and he built houses for them. So we, you know, it's an amazing, as Karen said, it's just an amazing place. It's with the sculpture and the fields, and And why don't you take off from there?
But, Frank, so during this time, though, were there other programs throughout the U.S. that offered a master's degree in arts?
Not very many. There were very few schools around the country that did offer the MFA degree. One, I think, was the University of Southern California, and there was one in the East, but it was very difficult to find a school that had a fine arts department graduate level. And I came from New York. I grew up on Staten Island and went to Wagner College on Staten Island. And when I looked around for schools, I applied to 3. I applied to Syracuse, Columbia, and Cranbrook. And I'm not really sure why. I can't remember back that far. But the other 2 I got a Bachelor of Arts degree, undergraduate. And they objected to the fact that I didn't have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So I would have to make up some courses. Cranbrook said, come on, just come.
Okay.
So I went to Cranbrook. And it is an amazing place. I mean, it has changed, obviously, since we left there, but it was this beautiful campus. It didn't look like a campus. It looked like...
Well, the architects were...
Yeah, and it was designed by Eliel Saarinen, the Finnish architect who was, you know, world-renowned. And he designed all of the buildings, a boys' school, a girls' school, high school, a little kids' school, a science institute,
Okay.
and the art academy. It was like living in a nirvana, in a way.
Was
And,
it?
his son, by the way, built the arch.
Yeah,
in St.
Saarinen's
Louis.
son built
Did he really?
Yeah.
Arrow, Saarinen.
Iliel's son, Arrow.
Really?
And they were both Finnish, weren't they? Finnish?
Well, I don't know where Arrow was born, but
Mhm.
Okay. Now, was it a very diverse institution?
yes, very diverse in people. The original faculty, a lot of them were still there when we were there. We first came in '54, and Zoltan Sepeši was the president at that time. Eliel
He
Saarinen
was
had
from Hungary.
died a few years earlier. Saarinen was from Finland. Sepeši was from Hungary. The potter was Maija Grotel from Finland.
Mhm.
The weaver was Marianne Strangell from Finland. So it was basically a Scandinavian. The original sculpture instructor was Carl Millis.
Okay.
And he wasn't there anymore. He was back in Sweden.
Okay.
But the student body was very diverse. We had people from Australia, a lot from Japan, Thailand,
Okay.
in Asia, the Philippines.
He was a former kamikaze pilot.
Yeah.
Is that right? Really?
Or
Japanese.
as he said he was. I'm not
Well-
totally sure of that.
That's what he said, right? So he
He
claimed
was alive, for
claimed
one
it. He
thing. He
claimed
was
it.
alive.
If he was alive, you kind of wonder then, right?
Yeah.
Aborted mission, maybe.
Artists claim a lot.
Yeah.
Let's sort of-
But there were students from South America, from
yeah.
Colombia,
Brazil.
from a student from Haiti, a few from Europe, but not too many. Not too many European
and there was
students.
one from Toledo also.
That one
Ah,
definitely
yes.
from Toledo.
Let's sort of shift gears and talk about Lemaxie Glover. Did you all meet him after you were married or before you were married?
Before.
Before. Okay, let's talk about what are some of your memories of Lemaxie? How did you all meet?
You want to go first?
Well, I don't remember how we met.
You were in the same dorm with
He,
him.
yeah, we were in the same dorm. You know, you just felt his presence, and you became part of this sort of this conversation that everybody belonged to. You know, he was. You just sort of slipped in and out of whatever others were thinking and doing. It wasn't an introduction. Certainly wasn't an introduction.
Okay.
Like, I want you to meet Lemaxie Glover from Toledo. But you might have met him before I really got acquainted with him. It's hard to say.
Well, see, Max was 39. I was 21. I graduated from college a little bit early, I guess, and a lot of the other students were my age. There were a few Max's age, but not too many. And he lived in the dormitories.
Okay.
and everybody had their own private room. It was more like a hotel in a way, or a
Yeah.
motel, sort of.
Okay. Okay.
And he sort of took all the young students with their various problems under his wing. And
Well, not all of them, but he certainly was
well,
busy.
he was there in case anybody had a problem.
Serving
And
as kind of a counselor, sort of.
Yes,
definitely.
he was.
Well,
Definitely a counselor.
a substitute father for
Yeah.
those who were away from home, you know.
Really?
And yeah, and if somebody had a problem, they knew exactly where to go to talk it out with somebody, because he was always willing to listen.
What kind of person was he? I mean, you all knew him as adults, whereas I think Karen knew him as a father, and but
Yeah.
what kind of a person was he?
You know, it's just like the hand fits a glove. I mean, the guy was, he was charming, he was funny.
He was
He
joyful.
He didn't try to be funny. He was just, he had sort of mellifluous, excuse me, kind of, body language. He was just, he was a sculptor. You felt his presence. He was very big, but not a tall man, but he was interested in what you were doing.
Okay.
He attended critiques that he wasn't even a part of, just to learn something from another creative source, way of working. So he
And there were only about 100 students.
No.
And most of them lived on campus in student housing. And so we were and it was a rather isolated community.
it was isolated.
And so we were all together for the time. And of course, Max went home weekends,
Okay.
but, it was a tight little community.
But you all ate together occasionally.
Oh, yes, we
Yeah.
ate together all the time. Wonderful food was served from the dining room, and, it was served by students. But there were these two cooks who cooked food for everybody, and we ate together.
Almost every Wednesday, we'd pick him up and take him to our place, to our barn, to our residence, and cook up whatever it was that you did.
Something rather,
Pasta of
yeah,
one form or
spaghetti
another.
or
And we talked about art, and we talked about life, and had a good feast. And then we went back to school in the evening and worked a little bit. And he went to his studio and worked. And it was sort of a kind of a natural way of life. We just went from one thing to another, and we didn't see him that often. We saw him at mealtime because he was.
yeah, everybody saw.
Everybody had
ate
their
together
area
all
of
the
work.
time.
So yeah, and in the arts, especially visual arts, you spend a lot of time alone.
Okay.
You have to.
Okay.
And Max certainly, he had an area of concentration, and we didn't spend a lot of time socializing. At mealtime, that was one thing, or a special event in the evening.
Okay.
But most of us went our own way.
That's your own way. You were telling me earlier about how he had hired you, I guess, Phil, to come and cut his shrubs. Tell me that story again about how that came about.
Yeah, he as I said before, I was sort of a Joe Dokes as far as the mechanics of things went. I suppose I could change a tire. I did, you change a tire now and then. In those days, you had a lot of flats.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see people with flats anymore, and maybe change my oil. That's about it. And watching Max work, it's phenomenal. I mean, the way he would put corners together and glue things. And He was a sculptor and a carpenter, a master carpenter.
Sure.
So when I got here, I learned a few things, and then of course I didn't learn a few things. But Max always wanted me to feel wanted, as if I was contributing something. So one day he asked me to cut the hedge out front, and he joked around a lot. He said, "My neighbors are going to see I can afford a white guy to cut my hedges." So I got a kick out of that. And a little nifty thing he had. It was like a little toy. And it was zip, and I was having a ball out there cutting this thing, and I noticed, I'm walking around with this thing with the cord hanging loose. There's nothing attached to nothing. Somehow it got mixed up in a hedge, and I cut the. Well, he had a hell of a laugh about that.
Yeah,
He
his immediate reaction was just to laugh.
Let me imitate him. He said, "Oh, he's calling Mary. Mary, hey Mary, look at this. Look what Phil did." And he's this wonderful belly laugh he had. "Oh, Phil, you're too much." That was Max. He had this. You never felt threatened, or he was never mean-spirited. I've never seen him angry. I've never seen him ticked off at. He was serious about a lot of things, and he wanted things to change. But I've never seen him, out of sorts. He was always, that positive thinker.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remarkable guy.
Yeah, and with his children, I must say I never saw him reprimand them. I've seen him give them instructions as to what to do, but not in any kind of a mean way, not in any reprimanding type way. He must have been a wonderful father.
I wish I had I love my father, but to have a father like Max, that would be like,
it would be a real treat.
Going to Six Flags every day or something. He was too much. He was just a wonderful, happy guy. And serious guy. He was serious, but he had a wonderful attitude.
He had very strong standards,
Yeah.
He expected a lot of them, I'm sure.
And he was hurt too. People hurt him. I can remember him trying for a job. Was it at UCLA or? He had to send. There was a point in which he was being considered for the sculpture position, and I think it was UCLA or USC, one or the other. And he had to send more material and a picture, and he never heard from him again.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
that
good.
was in 1955.
That was. Yeah. But he loved teaching high school. He talked about it a lot. He was so happy to be here, and the kids loved him.
Okay. Any parting words?
Well, I think that he told me at one time that the reason he switched high school to Scott was at the time of a lot of riots, and that he felt that they needed him there, that the students needed him at Scott. And that was because he had been at Woodward so long. Okay. But that was the reason why he switched from one to the other.
But if that's true, is that surprising to you?
No, not at all.
Very strong countenance, really.
Well,
he had it together.
Okay, as we wrap up, any final thoughts about Maxie Glover that you want to share?
Yeah, I just wish he had lived longer. But he was needed, and he had the misfortune of passing away and it made a lot of people sad. It's just like losing an arm,
So you guys are really good friends then.
Yeah. Well, when we were first married, our families, of course, were distant.
My dad said, "Don't bother. I don't want to see you anymore."
And
of course, in a year or so, everything was fine.
Everything was fine,
but
sure.
But
was
this
really
was where we
shook
were
up.
welcome. This is where the door was open and come on in.
We left Cranbrook and we headed out to Colorado for we didn't know where to go. We just graduated. Well, I didn't, but Jan did. And we headed out to Colorado, and then we decided we better go back to New York. What are we going to do here? Look at the mountains? We better head back to New York and get some work. Well, we had enough money to get to Toledo. And Max,
He gave us $15.
he's standing at the door. It was about 11 o'clock at night or so, and I wrecked that car, and I bought a terrible, terrible car, a 48 Plymouth sedan. Top speed 39 miles an hour, something like that. Mm-hmm. It took us 10 hours to go 300 miles. No air conditioning.
Oh, gosh.
Worse than, we got here, and we came to the door, and Max pulled a curtain aside, and he had that smile, and he opened the door, and he said, I thought you guys would be here today. Something to that effect, you know. He had like premonition, you know,
Is that right? Wow.
ESP, whatever. And so we were always welcome here. And we weren't welcome in our own families, but we were welcome here. And that was true anytime. We didn't have to make a reservation.
Just came.
They loved seeing us, they loved us, and we loved them.
Okay, then, let that be the last word, guys. Thank you ever so much for sharing your thoughts about Lemaxie Glover. Again, I think his life he enriched so many others' lives, and it's good that you were here at this particular time to share with us your thoughts.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.